An American university student was found dead in her home. As soon as the police started investigating, they found out several disturbing facts. They had 3 versions of what had happened at once, and each of them was scarier than the other. It was only 2 years later that they finally managed to find out the truth, even though they had to pay for it with blood. Brock Baker was born in 1981 in a small American city in the state of Indiana. Since high school, she began to get interested in journalism, worked for a local newspaper and planned to link her future life with this profession. She had every chance to achieve some success in this direction. The girl was very sociable, had a lot of friends and showed a keen interest in any topic that turned up to her. After school, Brooke moved to a town called Vincennes, where she entered the local university at the Faculty of Journalism. There she immediately got a job at a student newspaper and made many new friends. Unfortunately, very soon she earned herself enemies. After getting a job at the newspaper, Brooke wanted to write a large-scale article about some high-profile topic related to the university. In the fall of 1997, when she was 19, she finally discovered a very disturbing fact. There were rumors on campus that several female students had been abused by male fraternity members. Brooke began to delve into this topic, communicate with victims and collect material for the investigation. When the members of the Brotherhood found out about this, the girls began to receive threats. Sometimes they threatened her openly. Later they started sending letters. But none of this scared Brooke. She wanted this investigation to help other students not to become victims of similar crimes. One day, when Brooke was at a friend's house off campus, members of the fraternity arrived there and began threatening her again. They told the girl that if she did not stop digging into this topic, serious consequences would await her. Fortunately for her, it didn't go beyond aggressive shouts and insults, but Brooke decided to protect herself from possible attacks from members of the Brotherhood. She moved out of the dorm into a rented house, which was located near the university and belonged to a campus police officer. In part, she did this because of the constant anxiety of her parents. They were aware of what topic Brooke was working on, and also knew about the threats against her. 2 weeks have passed since then. She continued to work on her investigation and at least felt safe at home. On the morning of the 7th of September, Sunday, her younger brother came to Brooke to check on her. No one responded to the doorbell, so my brother pulled the door handle and found that it was unlocked. At that moment, he thought that his sister had not woken up yet, but the truth turned out to be much scarier. Going into her bedroom, her brother saw that Brooke was lying in blood, without signs of life. He immediately called the police and an ambulance, but the girl was already dead. From the very first minutes, it was clear to the investigators that they were faced with a murder. This was evidenced by the amount of blood throughout the house and multiple signs of a struggle. The police also noticed something strange. The bathroom was filled to the brim, and the faucet was open. There were several towels and a number of other items in the water. Apparently, the criminal tried to wash everything he touched. In the kitchen sink, they found a knife that had been thoroughly washed with detergent. Because of this, the police could not find fingerprints and traces of the killer's DNA in the house. Moreover, there were no signs of forced entry. This meant that the girl either let the criminal in herself, or left the door unlocked. After examining Brooke's body, medical experts confirmed the fact that she died as a result of the attack. An unknown criminal inflicted 11 stab wounds on her, and also subjected her to violence. Experts were able to extract a DNA sample of an unknown man from her body, which was immediately checked against all available databases. Unfortunately, there were no coincidences. This meant that before Brooke's murder, he had never been caught by the police for any crimes. The police began to search for witnesses who could see who came to Brooke's house on the day of the murder. Here they also suffered a setback. The neighbors didn't see any suspicious people, cars, or anything else. As a result, in the absence of at least some evidence, detectives had to work almost blindly. After talking to the victim's friends and relatives, they learned about threats against her from members of the university fraternity. Considering that Brooke wanted to make public possible cases of violence against girls, the police immediately began to look at these students as suspects. They were interrogated and DNA samples were taken, none of which eventually showed a match. Whoever attacked Brooke that night was definitely not a member of the Brotherhood. However, the police did not rule out that they could involve someone from the outside in this terrible case. But the version about the Brotherhood's involvement did not agree in some ways. The killer got into the house through an open door, because there were no signs of forced entry. Brooke's acquaintances said that she never left the door open, especially against the background of threats against her. Which means she either knew her killer and let him in, or he somehow convinced the girl to let him in. When Brooke's friends and family found out that the Brotherhood's involvement seemed unlikely to the police, they shared another disturbing fact. After moving into rented housing, the girl repeatedly complained about the landlord, who behaved frankly strangely. He often came to her house without warning and permission, opening the door with his keys. Several such cases made Brooke seriously think about her own safety. The landlord came to her at night when she was sleeping, went into her room and turned on the light. Another time he came into the house when the girl was washing in the shower. Each time he explained it by saying that he urgently needed to pick up some things from home. Of course, Brooke didn't believe it and began to be afraid of the man. The law categorically prohibits the landlord from entering the tenant's home without his permission, and the consequences can be very serious. It would seem that the campus police officer should be well aware of this, but he continued to come to the house under various pretexts. Given that he has a personal set of keys, he could open the door at any time without any signs of forced entry. After learning about this, the city police visited him with questions. The man declared his innocence and issued a DNA sample, which also did not match the one found on the girl's body. No other evidence of his involvement could be found, and detectives were again left empty-handed. They soon found out that a few days before the murder, Brooke had placed an ad in the newspaper looking for a neighbor. She was afraid to live there alone because of the constant visits of the landlord and hoped that if someone else lived in the house, he would finally stop coming there. In addition, she also hoped to share the rent with someone in order to save significantly. Detectives became interested in this ad and built a new version. The killer could have responded to it and come to Brooke's house to look at the dwelling. Once alone with the victim, he could attack her. This could explain the absence of traces of hacking, but it also complicated the search for the culprit. Considering that none of the neighbors saw strangers near the house, it was simply impossible to track the mysterious visitor. The only thing left for the police was to look for new leads. The case dragged on for months. Detectives continued to search for the culprit, working out all possible options. In total, 400 people were interrogated, DNA samples were taken from 50. All of them didn't match the sample found on Brooke's body. Investigators even traveled to neighboring states to check several suspects for involvement in the murder, and all this did not bring any results. It took almost 2 years before there was a breakthrough in this case. On the 5th of July, 1999, the police received a report about the disappearance of a student of the same university named Erica Norman. The police arrived at her house, where a terrible sight awaited them. There were traces of blood on the floor and walls. But then they noticed something really disturbing. The bathroom was filled to the brim, and the faucet was on. A sofa cushion floated in the water. The girl herself was nowhere to be found. Detectives quickly realized that the same person who had killed Brooke 2 years earlier was very likely involved in this crime. And now they have a new chance to catch this maniac in hot pursuit. And here they finally got lucky. Thanks to a large-scale interview of witnesses, the police managed to find out that the last time on the day of the disappearance, Eric was seen leaving the restaurant with another student, 22-year-old Brian Jones. The young man agreed to provide a DNA sample and even allowed the police to search his house and car without a warrant. He also gave the police the clothes he was wearing on the day Erica disappeared. Detectives studied his biography and found out that he had never been involved for any violations. Such willing cooperation led them to the idea that he was unlikely to be involved in the murder. Unfortunately, the experts were unable to find any traces of DNA or fingerprints at the scene of Erica's murder, but the DNA sample from Brooke's body was still in the laboratory. Comparing it with Brian's sample, experts have established a 100% match. Immediately after that, Brian was arrested and interrogated, but he denied his guilt. Digging a little deeper, the detectives found out that the young man was personally acquainted with Brooke. He shared a room with her boyfriend. While Brian was under arrest, the police were trying to solve the main mystery: where is Erica Norma? Judging by the amount of blood in the house, detectives did not expect to find her alive. However, they still organized a large-scale search and 2 weeks later announced the discovery of her body. A farmer from the neighboring state of Illinois found the girl in a cornfield. After receiving a sample of her DNA, experts quickly established Brian's involvement. The fact is that during the search of his car, traces of blood were found on the steering wheel and door handles. They were also found in his house, on the frame of the shower stall. All of these samples matched Erica's samples. Given such a set of evidence, Brian would have been found guilty with a high degree of probability and could have received a death sentence. Apparently, he was frightened by this prospect, and he decided to confess to the murder of Erica Norman in exchange for refusing to be executed. The trial went pretty quickly, and the judge sentenced Brian to 60 years in prison for Erica's murder. Then the trial of Brooke Baker began. The essence of Brian's deal with the investigation was that the court refuses the death penalty on both charges, and he confesses to only one murder. Accordingly, the killer declared his innocence. At first glance, such a transaction may seem strange, but in fact everything is logical here. If the criminal refuses to admit guilt, and the set of evidence is limited, there is always a chance that the lawyers will be able to get him off. Even if this does not happen, they can delay the trial for years. Confessions exclude both of these scenarios, and even for one murder, the guilty person will receive enough time to stay in prison until old age. Thus, a dangerous killer is guaranteed to be isolated from society. However, Brian's lawyers failed to achieve a miracle, and in December of the 2000th year, the court found him guilty of the murder of Brooke Baker. For this, he received a life sentence plus 20 years for violent acts. Despite all this, he still has the right to apply for early release in the 2030th year, that is, after 30 years of imprisonment. Considering that Brian was only 24 years old at the time of sentencing, he has a hope to be released at 54. However, there are few chances for this. Usually such monsters reject all petitions for release. Let's hope that he will be left behind bars until a very old age. After Brian went to jail, the police wondered for a long time if he had any other victims. It is obvious that his crimes were serial in nature. The detectives were 100% sure of one thing. If Brian had managed to escape punishment, he would have killed again sooner or later. Take care of yourself and thank you for watching.